Hi, I'm Ilan Goldstein, and you're watching the Scrum Shortcut series. In this video, we will be focusing on sprint planning preparation. Tom DeMarco and Timothy Lister are the industry veterans who highlighted the fact that providing lots of satisfying closure is one of the key elements of a chemistry building strategy for organizations. I couldn't agree more. I've also discovered that there is something else that goes hand in glove with satisfying closure to even further build great chemistry in Scrum teams. And that's the provision of lots of clean, fresh starts. Because of the time box nature of a Scrum sprint, the good news is that we'll always get plenty of both. By resetting the team goals every iteration during our sprint planning sessions, the team is offered regular fresh starts instead of getting stuck on an endless treadmill of never-ending work. Now, before the team is gathered in the sprint planning room, it's really important that the product backlog is refined appropriately. At the very least, the product owner needs to determine the next priority product backlog items while also making sure that there is enough acceptance criteria associated with each PBI to allow the developers to get started with their technical design. Now, when Scrum first came about, it was expected that the sprint duration would be 30 days, no more, no less. Thankfully, things are a little bit more flexible now, and it's widely accepted that the sprint length can vary from team to team. Most Scrum teams that I work with utilize a 2-week sprint time box, although there are many others that opt for either the shorter 1-week cycle or longer 3-week cycle. Very few still utilize a 4-week sprint length. So, how do you settle on a sprint length for a new project? Some teams prefer a longer duration to help them gain momentum. Others prefer the simpler planning that comes with a shorter sprint duration. The primary factor to consider is whether the product owner is likely to continually change requirements due to genuine product domain volatility. If so, a shorter duration is probably a good idea. If requirements are unlikely to change that often, the longer duration can still work well. Once a decision is made about the preferred sprint length and the team feels comfortable with the iteration duration, lock it in, as there are a few very good reasons to avoid changing the sprint length. A regular rhythm helps the team focus and better understand how to pace itself. And the velocity metric needs a consistent sprint duration to be meaningful and easy to calculate. Further, if you play around with the sprint length, your sprint review, retrospective, and planning sessions will not fall on the same day of the week from sprint to sprint. This can cause logistical headaches when it comes to organizing meeting rooms or stakeholders' calendars. Before jumping into the sprint planning process, the team needs to determine its sprint capacity. Please note that not everyone will have full capacity for every sprint. For example, some team members may need to work across multiple projects. Certainly not an ideal situation, but it happens, and you need to ensure that these developers aren't over-allocated. Also, don't forget to take into account any public holidays, training, or scheduled leave. It's common to fall into the trap of believing that team members who are dedicated full-time to the sprint will actually get to spend their entire workday on sprint-related tasks. There are numerous activities that can interfere with the sprint, including, but certainly not limited to, refining the product backlog for the upcoming sprint, assisting other people who aren't in the Scrum team, handling emergency production support issues, and being a good citizen of the organization by participating in company events and other activities. A good way to factor in this interference is to remove time up front from the team capacity to cater for these activities. For example, one team I worked with, who were operating with 2-week sprints, ended up allocating 54 hours per sprint for each developer. Here's how it broke down. There were 5 days a week for 2 weeks, giving them 10 days of 8 working hours each. They then deducted a full day for sprint planning, review, and retrospective sessions. Now, once the team started to mature, the full day wasn't needed, but it was factored in initially. This left 72 hours. Then they sliced off 2 hours a day to deal with the non-sprint related tasks, leaving them with 54 hours. It's really important to note that these figures aren't any sort of industry or Scrum standard. The best way to determine the correct number of hours for any given team is to use historical sprint interference data and trends, as every team's organizational context and environment will vary. And that's it for sprint planning preparation. I'll see you in the next video for another Scrum shortcut.